back in the day, if you were sheltered or, your parents had walls up, you were kind of insulated and your elders could control the narrative that was being spoke to you until you ventured off into the world. How do we deal with our kids being so exposed to everything in today's day and age?
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. I know it might seem weird. I mean, do these guys wear the same clothes every week or nope?
We just like what we got on.
We just like what we got on, man. All right. No. Why you thinking about the wrong stuff? All right. So, Mike, we were actually talking about something a minute ago, and it was a part of a different episode. But we wanted to kind of make a full episode of it because it's a crazy subject.
So it was something that we were talking. I mean, we talk about kind of often. I live it, so I'm always thinking about it. But it was how things have rapidly changed, right? Where, I'm literally one of the last generations that grew up without a cell phone, so to speak. I got my first cell phone at the end of high school, and it was super basic, right? Facebook came on when I was in college. Mm-hmm. I remember, I'm almost 40, so everybody under me grew up with phones, and they, rapidly changed, and it keeps changing with this AI. So we were just talking about how back in the day, like in my generation or even previous, if you were sheltered or, your parents had walls up, you were kind of insulated and your elders could control the narrative that was being spoke to you. Like, this is what it is, don't ask me about that. And that's just kind of how it was until you ventured off into the world. A lot of people that happened in college, and we were, kind of talking about how we've seen different types of people come to college, and the ones that didn't have any exposure, sometimes they went extreme the other way. When they got to college, they just went crazy. But, something that I think we wanted to kind of hone in on is just the kids today, just what they're dealing with. Because, even if your kid doesn't have a cell phone, like my kids are young, right? My oldest two are 10 and 7. So we made the conscious decision to not give them a cell phone yet, but they constantly ask for it. And most of their friends have it. So I know that they have access to cell phones. Mm-hmm. So it's a conversation that we're gonna have to, quickly figure out, all right, what are we gonna do? And how do we deal with our kids being so exposed to everything in today's day and age?
Yeah, man, that's great question, and I'm glad, and it's going to be interesting because all three of us kind of come from three different generations, so we got different exposure levels as it relates to cell phones at this in life period. But let me go back in time, okay? And the exposure piece is more prevalent now because it's easy to get access to information. But I think about, as you were talking, like how when I was growing up, and I was thinking, what was I exposed to? And in reality, at the time, I was exposed to a lot more than probably the normal kid. And it's not because of my parents, it's because of my neighborhood. Mm-hmm. Okay, as much as, my parents, kids go out, we at that time, we played outside a lot. And it's okay, you was pretty safe, you ain't run into no problem. But the issue though, at least, and I'm glad I got exposed, but it wasn't all good exposure. So, the thugs, gangs was prevalent. So, thugs out, your friend, it's just like you saw the winos, you saw all these other folks, liquor and all that. Let me just just be transparent. Y'all might not know some of these stories, so don't judge me too hard. But so we used to do what you call cop liquor, right? For some people that don't understand that, we had individuals, we was exposed to alcohol very early. I mean, in elementary school to the point. So we saw the street, we saw individuals, we saw the hustle, we saw all that. But then let's fast forward to when I went to high school. They took me out of a public high school and put me in a private high school. So I'm with these cats that ain't really seen all this. They to the point we're talking about, when they got exposed to it, they dealt with it a whole different way than I did. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And they dealt with situations that we would run into differently than I did too. And even going to college, you can tell who grew up a certain way. I got exposed to certain things and who didn't. That naiveness of some people. But then that other side where you had those who was like manipulating situations because they was exposed to different stuff. So that's the exposure that I saw. And going to now, it's like you get all this media in your face and it kind of brainwashes you, man. You know what I'm saying? So that's my walk. But I think we want to talk about how today the kids are so exposed to all this media, cell phones and all that. But whatever we was exposed to impacts who we are and how we respond to different things.
I think how it kind of affects you, the exposure, kind of depends on what foundation is already there before you get exposed.
Yeah, that's true.
So like what I mean by that is like a kid who, let's just say, for example, my parents at the home are teaching me that God is my source. They're going through the scriptures with me. They say that God has a plan for me. He said, all these different things about how God is there for me. Mm-hmm. And then I get to, let's say, high school, and another kid says, well, actually, I think this rock could actually help you out. This rock actually, if you put this inside of your room, it's gonna help you to gain your memory back. Because that's part of the power that's within the crystal here. So really, if you put this, when you're studying, put this one in your room, and then when you want to, feel better when you're eating, you can put this one inside of the dining room. And then when you want to feel more, like you're learning something, you put this one inside of the bedroom, right? And so this kid comes and tells this other kid about all this stuff, and then now he's a little bit like, wait a minute, I don't know, that doesn't really match up to what I've been taught to this point in time. And so they go and have that conversation with their parent. Dad, Johnny told me that this crystal right here is going to help me to get memory. And I know you have a lot of work to do in a regular day. So maybe, if you use this crystal, it can help you too. And then that's the situation where Johnny's dad gets to go ahead and reinforce what was already taught and then correct a few things. Different scenario. Johnny has no understanding of any of this stuff. And then he gets the same kind of conversation with Tom. And now he's like, I figured it out, guys. I've got the answer. I'm going to get all of these crystals because this is the truth. And don't let him get any sort of pseudo proof of concept. Yeah, I was studying this thing and I had the root. I had that rock in there. I remembered, therefore that's what it is. This is spiritual right here. Mm-hmm. Completely different situation.
What you said is your exposure is going to impact you based on the foundation that's already in place, mm-hmm. right? So if you have a little bit of foundation and you get exposed to something, you have a lot of room for it to impact. Mm-hmm. If your foundation is very much built up, when things come your way, you're going to stop and think, because you're going to ultimately take that new information and you're going to vet it against your existing belief system. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And you're going to say, well, hold on, that's different than what my belief system already is. And hopefully it'll cause a kid to stop and say, something fishy about this. Like, this doesn't make sense. Yeah. And either go find better information, seek wise counsel, or just go through their own analysis and just, continue to vet out the information. And to me, right there, that's the key with these kids is we got to do a better job of putting more tools in their toolbox.
There you go.
And less of, do this because I said so, or you got to go do that because this is the way it's, because that's when I think at a certain point, kids are going to say, you know what? I don't even know why I'm doing this. My parents just made me do it. And if I when it, and this is something that I'm speaking first. I'm in the field with this where this is not an easy thing to do sometimes because these kids are taught to question everything. And as a parent, there's times where you just don't feel like being questioned. You don't feel like explaining yourself to a kid. And that's the part where I think for, some parents will probably feel me like, you know what? That doesn't work all the time because depending on the situation, this ain't the time or the place for you to ask these questions.
Mm.
And that is always a challenge for kids to understand because they're thinking from a childlike state of mind.
Yeah.
They don't understand the ways of the world, but what I try to do is if we have these type of situations and I might have to get a little curt or a little abrupt with them, I'll go back and try to fill in the gaps and say, listen, I understand you may not have liked the way I said this. Or I've even apologized to my kids. You know what? I've lost my patience a little bit, and I apologize for that. But this is how we can avoid this next go around because at the end of the day, there's a hierarchy in this household.
Mm-hmm.
God, parents, y'all somewhere on the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
It might, what I'm saying? Y'all coming in there, but as kids, y'all fall at the bottom of the rungs of this hierarchy, not because y'all any less than us, but at the end of the day, instruction rolls downhill.
Yeah.
And at the top is God. And then me and your mom gonna do some consultation.
Mm-hmm.
And by the time it gets to you, sometimes it may just be an instruction.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lot of feedback in there.
Because we can't depend on you.
No way. And I think it's great how you laid that out and just the whole thing about that. And I applaud you with the cell phone because as you were talking, I was just thinking, it's like by not having a cell phone as long as possible, they have to find other resources to find information, whether it be coming to you. And don't get me wrong, they're gonna look, they friend, they see their phone and all that. But the point I'm getting at is that the questions they have, they gonna seek answers somewhere else. They gotta manually seek answers, right? So when they do get a cell phone, they at least know other places to go try to find the answer.
Yeah.
You follow me? Whether it be a parent, whether it be somewhere else, they'll find other mechanisms. Go to the computer, whatever the case. But what I'm getting at is that when you have a tool that's so powerful as the internet so early, it becomes a crutch.
Mm-hmm.
And you can limit your thinking. And I think with AI, that's one of the things that people worry about, artificial intelligence, right? I use it to a certain degree, but I try not to overuse it because I don't want it, writing everything for me. I don't want to get to the point where I don't start thinking. So that overexposure too early can kind of shut the brain down in some respects to say, hey, you know what? I need an answer to this question. Let me go here, instead of thinking and trying to figure out the problem yourself.
Being able to have that pause to actually question things, I think as a parent, you should pat yourself on the back. If your kid was exposed to something in school, someone says something in school, and they come back and ask you about it, you have done a good job. So far, you've done a great job because that doesn't always happen.
You don't.
With no foundation, they just go off. They don't ever tell you about it, but they now worship a rock.
and they with the other people who worship the rock. So
you find out later.
Yeah. So I think what we're saying here is that foundation is key. And I know, Mike, you and Lauren, y'all do a great job with your kids. And I know sometimes as a parent, you don't feel like you're doing the job that you think. But I say this to all of us, man. I look back how many times the stuff you learn from your parents, you repeat or it goes in your head like those things. But at the time as a kid, if you look back, your parent couldn't see that in you.
Yeah.
It took 10, 15, whatever years later before that burned in. So that foundation was there. And even like what I was talking about, how I grew up, what of course God was looking over me, but what stopped me from going over the edge in a lot of those situations was because my dad, mom was like, think for yourself. Don't follow the crowd. You know what I'm saying? As a kid, I remember that. It's like, it was times where they would go off, the group would go off and do something, and it just didn't feel right. Like, nah, I'm going to the crib. I'm going home.
Yeah, and so when you talk about that foundation being poured, because when I think about foundation, I'm a realist. I think about concrete being poured, right?
Yeah.
And as it's being poured, it's still a liquid-based. It's a thick liquid, but it's still liquid. So you can still mold it based on the shape that you're trying to fill. So you have a segment of people that are intentionally, strategically, and constantly pouring good concrete. But then the flip side, you have so many people and parents or coaches, mentors they're not pouring the right concrete. And so this is the reason why I was thinking about this is because we're talking about one side of the coin, but it's so important for authentic people to really open their mouth, be intentional about their time, like really make a point to touch some of these kids. And like I said, it's not even a biological thing. Because to me, what I always say is me having more kids just put a bigger magnifying light on other kids that didn't have that built-in foundation. So although I have 4 kids of my own that keep me plenty busy, I'm very intentional about spending time with other kids and mentoring and just talking to them and just being present in the moment, because I know those are the kids that are really, they're up against like a very challenging circumstance, you know, because when you don't have the examples or you have people that, you know, you don't feel like you're really being seen or they don't really care, that's when, you know, kids go off and they go find gangs to find fellowship or, you know, they go to the streets and go find a quick escape. Like that's when we really, you know, have potential of losing our kids.
Yeah.
The other, and we touched on this a little bit at the beginning, but I want to talk about like underexposure too, because like there's also a danger in sheltering a person so much that they've never even come in contact with certain things and they don't know how to react when they do come in contact with it. Because like I'm sure y'all can think of some examples. You mentioned college, people get into college and then, oh my goodness, the world, this is different. But it's like, it's that kind of situation. Like you've been sheltered so much, they didn't even tell you that there was a such thing as alcohol.
No.
Like you ain't never heard your parents cuss. Then you get into a place where it's drinking, it's smoking, we staying up all night, every day. You ain't in that little community where everybody's just studying all day and making sure they're doing the right things. No. You go and see this other option. You like, well, shoot, let me try it. That's the dangerous part right there.
Yeah.
Because you weren't exposed enough. You didn't actually have the opportunity to even have the question for your parent, for them to say, actually, son, let's just go to the word real quick. There's no crystals that tells you about your memory. Yeah. That's not in there. And
that lack of exposure can create a weak foundation to deal with other things, right? And I guess, and this is where we kind of burning this from both sides. We're talking about the overexposure. And I'm glad you brought up the underexposure because both of them are dangerous. Oh, yeah. Both of them can cause harm and actually because when you underexpose, and let's state it for a minute, you got this individual who can easily become what I call a victim of their surroundings, you know, because they don't know, so they're naive. So it's like they're willing to buy anything in a sense. You know, and they're willing to kind of, oh, what? You know, and, oh, wow. You know, it's like, because, your sons might not be using a cell phone, but if you don't educate them on life, when they do get a cell phone, they're going to think everything on there is like real. And that whole thing in college is like, oh, underexposed, you know, never talked about alcohol, never talked about the effects of alcohol, just been told you can't drink it. But then you get to a point where nobody's telling you that, hey, just try this one drink.
Take a sip.
Yeah.
Like it.
Yeah, and then they don't realize it's a mixed drink and they drink it like pop. And then before you know, they done slammed about 3 or 4 and then they like 2 up, you know? So, yeah.
Essentially, like if you don't properly prepare, you know, these kids, essentially what we're doing is we're releasing like a sheep into the wolf's den.
Yeah.
And how is that going to end? You know what I'm saying? We know how that is going to end because the thing about wolves is once they smell that you're different and you're not able to defend yourself properly, they're gonna attack. So I think you definitely have to strategically introduce exposure to your kids. Like with me, for example, I've done, you know, a bunch of things like intentionally, and I would talk them through it. You know, I would have them, you know, and we may play football in this suburb. But then I had them wrestling in HP, you know, which is a much different environment. And I knew it was gonna happen initially. And I talked them through it the whole time. Like, and it was some tough lessons in there because you're dealing with different types of kids that are growing up, and the environment makes some of these kids just become very outwardly aggressive. We promote aggressiveness in our community a lot of times. Like, you think about it. You know, you walk around, you got a pit bull, you look tough, you know. If you got to hit first, don't let them hit you, hit first, you know. So that's the type of mentality. And if you never equip your kids on how to deal with that, like another example was in the Cave of Abdul, my son's training, they talk about the lion and the lamb, you know, where, you know, at some times you do need to be more gentle and have that lamb type effect, but there's times where that lion got to come up.
Yeah.
And if you've never been trained on how to bring that lion out, how to harness that energy, and actually know how to be effective when you need to defend yourself, it's not gonna be there when you need it.
Yeah.
And that ain't the time to be trying to pull out your new arsenal when you in the middle of a fight. You know what I'm saying? You have to know, you know, in the beginning, like, listen, you know, I'm gonna try to avoid this situation, but if it's here, we got to deal with it, and I'm gonna deal with it effectively.
Yeah. No, I like the whole sheep and wolf piece, because it's that's real life, and the wolves are out there. I mean, and when we look at it, we were talking about this before we even started the day, how, you know, social media, what's being portrayed, how individuals that run social media, the music industry, all these different things are being, you know, they are being controlled by design. They're putting stuff out to try to shape how you think and how you act and how you purchase. Okay, and if you don't have a strong foundation, you will take on those attributes. And this, you know, rap music. I mean, look, I love rap music. I grew up with rap music. Now I don't listen to today so much because it don't resonate with me. But then when I do listen to some of it, and you listen to the words, you're like, okay, this music is telling me that women are this, and this, and all of it's bad, right? And that men should do this, and this, and all of it is negative. Then I'm like, man, what is that doing to my head? You know, what is that doing to my headspace? So, you know, but if you don't have a foundation, you don't even question that. You know that's what we're talking about here. I think is like that exposure, underexposure, and knowing that, man, you know, we gotta think about, okay, what are we exposing ourselves to constantly? I worked at a nuclear power plant, my first job. We used to have to put on this suit to go into certain areas of the plant. I would be an idiot if I walked in that plant where I knew radiation was exposed. You know what I'm saying? I'm exposing myself to something that's gonna kill me. So I think, you know, we didn't talk about this yet, but we need to think about, what are we exposing our kids to? What are we exposing ourselves to? And is it gonna be harmful or helpful? You know what I'm saying?
Well, let's talk about that. Because I think there's, this is the subject of this episode is like overexposure, like more so in like the negative senses of it, but there's also like a tremendous amount of positive exposure too. Yeah. Like you can have that balance. You can make sure that you strategically put people in places to make sure they see certain things. I'll tell you just real quick, in my life, you know how they tell you, don't tell your dreams to small-minded people. Don't give a big dream to a small-minded person, right? Because they'll try to bring it down to something that they can understand. Yeah. Man, when you've been exposed to so much, I think your baseline raises up so much. Like what you expect to get, what you expect to achieve, is just so much higher than certain people. And I mean, like, you know, you get the rich kids where they just expect they should get a Lambo and a Ferrari, but whatever. But they don't really they didn't really get exposed to what it takes to get there. Mm-hmm. So there's a disconnect. Now, in my life, man, I mean, the whole big idea, small-minded people is very much true, because I have seen so much. Like I have seen like what really sick, really homeless, really hurt looks like, feels like. I mean, getting your home like robbed, like multiple times and all your stuff getting stolen. I've seen like people make $2 million in a day and that be a bad thing. No, no, I think like, and it's like, cause they expected more. And so it's like, when you have these like two extremes, it's like when I think about what I plan to do with my life and what I believe I've been called to do, I can't settle for the minimum. I can't settle for average because it's like I've seen too much at this point. I know that this is possible. How in the world could I settle for this menial lifestyle? It's like I've seen exactly how that happens, and if they can do it, oh man, I got God.
But that exposure, and I'm glad you kind of tied it back to Mike and he was talking about his boys, because it is good exposure. And the reason why you doing that is because you getting that foundation prepared. And as you was talking about that, and kind of when you were talking a little bit too, and I'm gonna go here for a minute, and hopefully I can say this the right way. Now I got friends, okay, it's obvious, you can all see we Black, okay? It's obvious we are. I got some lotion on my hand. But anyway, so the point that I had a friend of mine, right, that they kind of, he was like, man, Rod, you know, I'm doing all right in life, live in the suburbs. He said, man, but my kids don't know what it's like. You know, they can't go back to his neighborhood and feel comfortable. They will be like outsiders. They will be like that sheep. They'll look like sheep. And so his thing was like, man, I gotta figure out how to get them exposed to the point where they can be able to identify, protect themselves, you know, from what's around them, and then be able to fit in too. So I say all to say that when you talk about exposure, we got to be very intentional, and that's what you've been, very intentional on what you try to expose your kids to, and why you're doing it. And even ourselves, because what you bring it up is like, if you only stay around people who are here, you never understand and see that this is up here, then you always targeting here. You know what I'm saying?
Quick, you'll find it if you. This is a good like a temperature check on your crew. Tell them something that or have. I dare you to have a vision that's like really out there. What you'll find out is as soon as you say it, they gonna start to argue for why it's not possible. That's I'm telling you. That's exactly what happened.
I know you're telling the truth. I know you.
They're like, nah, people don't actually do that. Because you got to think about this other thing, and there's just no way that this would work. And that it's like, bro, I saw it happen. This is what it looked like. I saw the dashboard. $2 million came in. Like it's not a joke. It's not hypothetical. This is real dollars. People did this. And it's like, nah, that's not a real thing. That's just fake.
Anytime I say any part of my story, I always say like exposure literally saved my life. You know, it was because of that very thing where I saw so much at an early age, like me moving around so much. And at the time, I'm like, man, you know, why we keep moving it? But I had the ability to see like new construction being built. I had the ability to leave Detroit for a few years and see a Virginia, see a Colorado. And then when I came back in high school, I looked at life differently. You know, I'm like, man, you know, and I recognized that other people, they were looking at life from more perspective because, like you said, if you don't see anything else, your vision becomes clouded. It's almost like those horses that have those blinders on the side, like that's all you can see. And so, you know, going back to these kids, man, that's the biggest thing where going back to the putting the tools in their toolbox, I was intentional about, you know, my wife and I, we taught, we were living in Arizona, we lived in Colorado, we lived in Tennessee. We constantly made a decision to come back because I'm saying, you know what? It's something special about being born in Detroit and it's just something special in Detroit that I cannot explain. And when you leave and you see how strongly people rep and feel about Detroit, you feel it. It's almost like you have to be out of town to really appreciate. And I recognized that, and I said, man, I want my kids to be able to have that. I want us to be able to bond through that because I've seen people like that where they have kids and they change so much. They said, well, I want to get them everything that I didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
And I always thought about when people say that, like, man, are you proud of who you are? Like, yeah, for the most part. Yeah. But it's like, well, did you give them anything that you did have?
Yeah.
And that's the part that, sometimes I'd be like, man, because some people grow up and they can't relate to their kid at all. And I'm like, well, you think about it, they grew up totally different. You never brought them around your family. You didn't explain the roots of how and why you think the way you think. You didn't explain the mistakes that you made. How would y'all have anything to relate?
No.
You never took the time to be intentional, and you were so gung-ho on, I gotta change everything, I gotta give everything I wanted. Some of that stuff you didn't have, you may have not even needed. You know what I'm saying? And that's the part that we gotta understand, that it's all about creating that recipe that is really a godly mix. It's not even our recipe. It's just saying, you know what? We're going to give them a little bit of that, a little exposure to that, a little bit of that. We're going to keep the guardrails on to a certain extent, make sure they're not going to fall off a cliff or anything. But at the same time, we're going to give them room to navigate and find their own lane.
Yes, balance. Yeah, I know we're at that point and we got to close out here in a little bit, but what you said about giving them what you did have and how you feel about, did you not like yourself a sense? You know what I'm saying? And I think that, if anything, I pick up on that for sure, because I don't know about y'all. I mean, I could talk about how I grew up, but I wouldn't trade it for nothing in the world. I would not trade it for nothing. Could it have been better in some area? Yeah, it could have been. But you know what? I can look back at almost every incident, good and bad, and say I learned something from it. You know what I mean? And I became better because of it. Even, especially the failures. It's about the time where we need to get it, summarize this. Now, we talked about the exposure piece. I think we hit it from a lot of different angles. I think this last piece was talking about how, how important it is, but how you do have some positive exposure and not so positive exposure. So how do we bring this together in a sense where, and it's not just for kids either. I mean, it's not just raising kids and all that, it's for us as well. So how you can pull this together?
A little nugget. If you are not a kid, I would say if you find your life being menial, and you feel like you haven't seen more, you wish there was more out there, but you just don't know where it is or how to do anything like that. I would say we have so much access to so much these days. We talked about it with the internet and everything like that. You got to get around some people who are doing things at a completely different level than you. Like, I mean, I do this thing where, like, every now and then, let's say I got to go on a flight to go do some sort of shoot somewhere, right? What I'll do is, instead of just having the ticket in, the regular economy, I'll upgrade it to first class to expose myself to that kind of experience. I want to, instead of just doing regular Uber, I'll do Uber Black, because I want to kind of expose myself to these things so that I have something to go for, so that I have something, a new normal to kind of aim for. It raises the bar on things. Yeah. And then when you get around people who it's like, so-and-so, he just did X, Y, and Z. And I mean, he just literally did a merge with Google or whatever. And you get around these people who are doing these major things. Then, and now we talked about comparison. A lot of people think of it as always in a negative light, but there's also a good light to put it in. Because when you start to compare, like, oh man, homeboy just did what? Shoot, if he can do it, I can do it too. Then you start to kind of have a different energy about how you do things. Then you start to think differently, like, man, if that's possible, then how? And then now you've completely gone on a different trip, a different road, because now you're aiming higher for things. So I would say, look, God put a lot in us. I mean, we were created to have dominion over the earth. And so if you feel like you've been limited, then it might be because you just haven't seen enough yet. Go out there and really experience something new, because it might just change your life.
Yeah, I don't know. You said something triggered me too, and it starts with God. But I think the thing, and I always reflect back to myself, right? Where I thought when I was in school, what I thought was the goal. Well, no, I made it the goal. Hey, you just wanted a place to live, you want a nice job, you wanted a nice ride. Then got to that, like, no, you know what? No, I want, because of exposure. No, I want a house, I want this, I want that. And each step of the wrong, it's like, even now, even what I call, retirement age, but I'm not retiring. But the point is that I don't see like staying here. I see these other opportunities that now I didn't see before, like 10 years ago, because I've been exposed to more stuff. Being exposed to you guys has been good, but also talking to people, like you said, different individuals. Like, me and my wife, when we go out, we like to sit at the bar because we like to meet people. And you meet some rich folks, right? And they sitting there talking. And like you said, they ain't no smarter than us. They not. It's just opportunity and taking that opportunity, understanding that, so I like to pick their brains. I'm sitting there like, okay, yeah, I could start a business. You know what I'm saying? So to your point, Martell, it's like exposure. So we should always strive to be exposed so we can push that bar out. Like everything works.
Good. We'll close it out.
All right.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Today for Tomorrow podcast. We appreciate you for being here. And if you have not already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. We're going to keep this kind of stuff coming, all right? And before we jump out of here, we got a few things to talk about.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out the hand movie. All right, hey, look, we Freedom Christ Ministry. We got services in person at 28202 Franklin Road here at the Freedom Center every Sunday at 11:30. Come check us out. Also, you see Mike repping Man 2.0. We meet the second Saturday of every month at 10 a.m. at the same spot. Come on out. You want to find out what it means to be a man based on God's blueprint? Come on out. Good brothers. We lift each other up, build each other up, and we support one another.
That's good exposure right there. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see y'all next week. Peace.